Hi. In today's video, I want to talk about uncertainty and how uncertainty contributes to anxiety and what we can do about it. We are so lucky, those of us who are living in Australia, and especially Western Australia, that it looks like, fingers crossed, things are under control. We've had very, very low numbers of new cases for the last few days. And so we're starting to have expectations of things getting back to normal, whatever normal might look like. Even so, there is still that bit of uncertainty. So, for example, last week, the Premier talked about the children going back to school with effect from next Wednesday, but said it was optional for parents whether they sent them. And my son's school only just told us today what their plan is for term two. But even then, some of us I know are going through a phase of thinking, should I send my child back? What if they catch it? Is it safe? What's the school going to do about distancing? And so we've still got that uncertainty hanging over us. We've also got the uncertainty of what happens after this. Will there be a second wave? How bad will that second wave be? When will shops and businesses open again? And what can we expect post-COVID life to look like? When can we travel? When can we even go regionally, let alone internationally or nationally? And of course, for those of you who are not as lucky as us, who are still in the midst of this in the UK or in Europe, or I know one or two people in South Africa are watching this, you also have much worse uncertainty, I guess, in terms of when will the current wave be over? How bad is it going to get? Is it going to affect me? Will there be a second wave? And all that uncertainty, it just makes us feel that much more anxious. At the same time, it would be weird if we didn't feel anxious at this time because there is a lot going on and there's a lot to be scared of. So anxiety is a perfectly normal response to the stress and the very difficult circumstances that we're in. But at the same time, we want to try to manage that where we can so that we can function. And all of this uncertainty just makes it much more difficult. In terms of how to cope with this anxiety and cope with this uncertainty, first important thing is if you've had this in the past, if you've had anxiety previously and you overcome it and you found techniques that work for you, then those are the things you should be doing now. And so anything anybody says, if it doesn't work for you, then just ignore them. And if you're already doing something that works for you really well, that's great. Carry on doing that. But for myself, what's worked for me is pretty much as follows. I remember a few years ago, I saw some meme appear on Facebook, and it basically said 3 things to remember about anxiety. And the first one said, if it happens, you can cope, you've got resources. The second thing was, it's not happening right now. And the third point was, by worrying about it now, you're spoiling the present, or something like that. And to me, that made perfect sense that a lot of this, if we know we have resources in place, it actually will help us to cope with this uncertainty. So, in terms of resources, knowing that you've actually managed so far, that we've been through a lot already and we've survived it, is actually a really important thing to keep reminding ourselves about. When you think about what life was like a month or 6 weeks ago, we've come through a lot to get to the point that we're at right now. We have those resources. We can basically cope again in the future. And things we do to help plan for problems in the future, it helps to make us feel better. So knowing that we have got some meals in the freezer, for example, knowing that we're just gently, without panic buying, making sure that we have plenty of food in case we have to quarantine. If we've lost our jobs, I'm worried about finances. Well, we can't magic up a money tree from anywhere, but at least if we've done some kind of spreadsheet or forecast or budget to see how much we actually do have to pay out. If we do contact banks, etc., and actually don't just ignore these problems, but put a plan into place, that makes us feel better. Because it's the uncertainty is the problem. When we have some kind of answer and we have some kind of certainty, even if it's bad news, it makes us feel a bit better. So we do have resources, and it's really important to remind ourselves of that. In terms of saying, well, it's not happening right now, well, of course it is happening right now, but what we're worrying about isn't what's happening right now, it's what we think is going to happen in the future. We're worried about the second wave. We're worried about what happens when the children go to school. And so that's what we need to not think about right now because it isn't happening right now. We have resources to manage it when it does happen. We will get through it. We've got through it in the past. We'll get through it in the future. And try not to spoil too much of what's happening at the moment because But there are times that are okay. There are times that we can see the sun shining, or we can talk to friends via Zoom or on the phone, and it gives us that little bit of joy. So by trying not to focus too much on the future, it will make today that bit more pleasurable. That then brings us on to things like mindfulness, which I'll talk about in more detail in a different session because this video is already getting quite long. But doing something that brings us back to the present is really, really important. So whether it's trying to, make some nice food, bake some bread, do some painting, some colouring, anything you do that makes you concentrate on what you're doing today and not think about the future can be very, very helpful. Because really, the only thing that is certain about all of this is that it's uncertain, and we're going to have to get used to that and find ways of getting through it. Take care. Speak to you all again soon.